Hi, I'm Natasha Antonioni, lifestyle expert and realtor here in Austin, Texas. And today we have the great pleasure of Lieve Saether, founder of Turnstyle Design. And we are going to talk about something that I am intrigued, which I believe is your superpower.
Oh, thank you.
Which is how to mix patterns in a room or a space.
It's a lot of fun. Let's start there. Pattern mixing has been going on since ancient times. It's not anything new, but I'm so pleased, even though I've been doing it for ages. I mean, really, that's always sort of been embedded in how I approach design. I'm very pleased to see it sort of making a comeback here now with maximalism and people liking to embrace color and sort of a vividness of life. Mixing patterns is important because it is that. It is very much the sort of color wheel of our lives, and it helps us actually to take life a little bit less seriously.
I so agree. It makes a space fun.
Yes.
Let's go back in time.
Yes.
So where did it start for you? Like, was it when you were a little girl? Like, how did that come to be?
Actually, yes. So because I grew up abroad, I sort of spent my life, I suppose by now, if you count the years together, because it was sort of in intervals of year here, a couple of years there, between the US and Europe and various parts. So I've had an enormous gift given to me, even though it was hard, never feeling like I had a place home, but I've had this enormous gift given to me of just wealth of, now I understand a lot of different cultural references. I can identify something French versus something Flemish or Dutch or German or Asian, and then within that, I feel very comfortable with that, and that is where a lot of my experience with pattern mixing comes from. Pattern mixing is really all about finding the soul of something and the layering effect so that you feel that it took time. It's representative of more of an experience than something flat would be. So it's a fun thing to play with and to experiment with and to identify your personality in.
It really can transport you when you're in a space. You walk into, let's say, a bathroom that has some kind of wallpaper on it, and it gives you a sensation. But how do you do it so well where you take these contrasting elements and bring them together? Is there kind of an anchor there somewhere, or has it become an intuitive process for you now?
Well, you're very sweet to point that out. It's something that I really enjoy doing, and it's been at the heart of my business for sure. It certainly is a lot of intuition. Again, I'm one of these people that will advocate for taking one's time to learn something. I do that with my whole team. They sort of, rib me about it a little bit because in this day and age where everything's gotten so fast, certainly intuition has a big play in it. But it's really about finding an understanding and a level of comfort with different size and proportion, and finding a color value and pulling that out, and just making sure that you understand how a pattern will play around you, right? Pattern works well to help you identify perspective, and it makes sometimes very flat space come alive.
So give us an example of a project that you've loved working on where you were able to bring these elements together.
Well, all of my projects are pattern full, shall we say, just because, again, it's my job to be a storyteller. And so when I meet a homeowner, I get to know them, and we have a very unique and bespoke personalized process so that no two of our projects are the same. Within that, we use pattern as a way to tell that story. It's sort of, I liken it to, an author who has an illustrator. For me, the patterning, the layering is very much the illustration of that life. A project that comes to mind maybe on the higher, the louder volume of pattern, shall we say, because pattern can be muted and quiet, and it can be full on and gregarious. So on the gregarious side, comes to mind, I was very fortunate to design a young artist's space. It was her studio. Her parents are really trying to feed this imagination in her and this capability. She's rather talented. And so this space was meant to pull out that creativity within her. So we used pattern as a way to create various moments so that no matter where she was in the space, when she was trying to allow ideas to come to fruition, she would have a perspective change and see something from a different light or in a different light. So a pattern there, for example, you know, you have to think of the functionality of things. Never do anything design-wise if you're not thinking about how it's going to work in the space on a practical level. But she, of course, needs to paint. And so I hand-painted the floors. Our studio is very hands-on.
So you're an artist as well.
I have long been, yes. I actually started in the fine arts.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So painted it and splatter painted it and just did this fun start, gave her this base so that she could continue to spill paint on it, say that 5 times, and grow this aesthetic without feeling like it was too precious. I basically gave her a canvas that was already started on the floor.
And
it's so liberating, right? As an artist, you feel like, okay, I think I got it.
How do you design a painter's space? Smart. Yeah.
So she does many things, right? Again, this is a budding artist who is at the point in her life, and hopefully this lasts for a long time, where she's exploring in all sorts of different media. And so for her, you know, we had spaces that were quieter for drawing. We had work tables for, you know, sort of just messing with things, building things, taking things apart. Clean, large tablet spaces for pastels where you really want to spread out. And we created this fantastic, I get sort of dreamy when I think of it again, because I think we would all love something like this just giant, oversized inspiration board that's beautifully done. You know, you and I have sometimes talked about the value of, even though it's meant for a purpose, you shouldn't overlook doing it beautifully and well, because then it lasts longer and you take better care of it. So we made this beautiful linen upholstered inspiration board that takes up floor to ceiling, I would say maybe 14, 15 feet across. And it allows her to see her work that she's using as inspiration, her work in progress. It allows her to see different culminations of where she's at in the process. Again, for me specifically, perspective and your change on that, getting out of your tunnel vision, is one of the most healthy things you can do for yourself on a daily basis. And so for an artist, we use pattern to do that. The client's daughter will populate that inspiration board.
Okay.
I will get her started because, again, my job is to be the conduit. My job is to help give people the tools to then run with their best selves, right? I meet somebody, I understand what's at issue, and I help them in a sort of therapeutic way address that through tangible things in their life, you know, the way they dress or what they do in their space or what they're eating, and, you know, just talking about one's daily sentiment. I will start an inspiration board from a very practical point of view, trying to get her out of her comfort zone. So I'll introduce ideas and images that she might not have otherwise thought of, and then she can use that as a jumping off point to continue to develop that, to add to grow, to take down, to move to the side. It's meant, spaces are totally living, and when I finish a space and give it to a client, it's up to the client to sort of, you know, make it messy or make it true to their everyday life.
Well, it sounds like there was a lot of different elements in this space. So
yes.
Do you anchor it in like 3 colors, or how do you take it all and make it work?
No, it's interesting because, you know, I understand the wish to be able to find a specific answer or a formula to do it. But I kind of go, as an individual, I've always gone up against formulas. It's precisely the spontaneity and the sort of natural verve that comes with matching 2 things, or not, I should actually not say matching precisely, because what I was getting at, I don't do 3 colors because I don't do a matchy process. It's a very organic process. I will think about the personality and who do I know her to be, and what colors do I think represent that in her? That's kind of where it starts for me. It is somewhat on a very psychological level, and then I'll drill down into thinking about how the space is lit. Where does she need light? Where does she need darkness? Where does she need comfy cozy? Where does she need to be able to get sunlight? You know, all of those things, and that will play in how we layer the pattern. And also the texture, right? We mustn't forget that it's not only pattern mixing, but texture mixing.
Absolutely. So for you, it's really more about the story.
Yes.
Than it is
Every
about,
time.
okay, we're going to use these 3 base colors, and then we're going to spawn from there.
Right.
Okay.
So for people at home that are trying to do this,
Yeah.
again, I think it's really important that you think about your own story. What do you like? I'm so fond of leopard print. It's been, I think of The Graduate, and I think it's the most fabulous coat I've ever seen anyone wear, and Bancroft for sure. I've always loved it as a neutral. These days you hear people identifying it more as a neutral, and I'm super excited about that. So if I were to think about how I might contemplate my own pattern, this might be a jumping off point for me. It's important that you, again, spend time and get to know what works for you. Another thing that's huge in my life, and I love that you're wearing it, is the color cream. I think it's a great way to blend in cream and lots of different versions of itself, textures of itself. That to me is just a thing of beauty, but that's very personal to me. So when you're mixing pattern, draw upon things that you know you like. If you're a lover of blue, start there. Start with blue and then think about how you might slightly shift that, to, like I said, a textural change or another color that you like.
Nice.
Yeah.
So have you ever had the experience of like taking a couple, for example, and then maybe the husband can't stand animal print, but the wife loves it, and how you make that work together, like his print and her print?
That's a great example, and I've actually had that happen. One part of the couple was not so fond, the other liked it, and I think it's a question of getting everybody on the table to have their voice heard. So if you're in a situation like that, make sure that you're making compromise. Make sure that if it is the husband that doesn't like leopard print, then what does he like? And put that in the space, and maybe be a little bit more reserved with your use of your favorite thing if there's a real dislike there. It's about shifting that balance of being open to compromise so everybody feels tended to, and then it'll be fine. And more often than not, in that situation, a spouse will actually come to love the thing that he or she thought they hated.
Because their voice is being
because
heard.
They're not being negated. Yes, exactly.
It's like when you're in a banter with your husband, and then you keep getting this one point, and then one day you have that breakthrough.
Yeah.
And it's like you're able to hear each other differently.
That's such a great thing when that happens.
So let's go to the tangible. Like, what were these two patterns that you used in this particular situation?
It was a leopard print, and I think the other person just liked very contemporary things. So we really found a balance. Oftentimes, again, in this wonderfully beautiful Instagrammable world, I can't say enough about how much access we have to seeing what's out there in the world. But we sometimes forget that things do not need to fit in a box. Everything goes together in this world. If you think about wandering through nature, you will see all shapes, sizes, color. We forget that contemporary can meet modern. Modern typically means at the turn of the last century. It's not the same thing as contemporary. It can, you can mix, if you're oddly a lover of Rococo, which is very, over embellished, you can find a little piece of that and put that in a very contemporary home. I think of, my fellow Belgian Axel Vervoort's homes. He just did the Kardashian West home, I think. You can find something that's extremely minimalist and insert that piece, and that is your version, that's your story, that's your pattern choice. It's okay.
It's almost like you were reading my mind. So when we're talking about patterns, you were saying it's all about texture as well.
Yes.
Right?
Very much so.
So have you ever done a room or an environment where you kind of go a little bit more one tone, but you make it all about the different textures?
Absolutely, because sometimes that's what the homeowner finds the most nourishing, right? I'm working on a project right now that's somebody's second home. It's their vacation home. And that's kind of the sentiment that we want there. We want it really brought down to basics, something that's almost raw. And it's that layering of pattern in a certain more restrained tonal base that gives them the most comfort. So absolutely, again, it's It's our individual stories. It's what works for us, not what works for everyone else. It is what works for us. And I just happen to be very experienced at helping draw that out of people. That's my superpower, I would say.
So when you're in this world of pattern, which
Yes.
you're in, and you don't have the
Yes.
luxury of looking at all of the beautiful patterns in this room, but how do you apply restraint to that?
That is a great question. So you want to be, again, mindful that you're thoughtful about this process. In anything you do, you wouldn't just sort of, throw the whole bucket of water at it. You start with a little pour, and you see how that fits in the vessel, and you keep going until it gets to the point at which you're satisfied. And that's kind of the same thing with pattern and color. If you start in a little space, and you live with it for a minute, and you see that your eye will probably be drawn to it, that's also a mouthful, because it will just pick up in your peripheral vision, then maybe you feel okay putting a little something elsewhere, and you'll allow it to grow from there. I've been doing it for so long that I know what can read as a neutral versus what can read as a pattern, full on versus what scale makes sense together. So, I can already take that 10 steps further in an instant because I'm versed in that. But for somebody just starting out, it's really important to just get comfortable and feel like, okay, I understand this. I got this. Sort of even on a subconscious level, because then you'll get to growing that, and you'll start to find, how not to do too much.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so for those of us that I love pattern.
Yes. Oh, I'm so glad. Yes.
Yes, but in my own homes, they tend to be more restrained. And so I go more the texture path. So for someone out there or myself, what recommendations do you have to kind of take those baby steps and bring a little bit of pattern in without overwhelming yourself?
Well, you're not alone. Most people will go into their homes and feel, well, I don't want to get it wrong, so I'm going to start with neutrals, or I'm going to keep it very minimal, right? Because everybody's afraid of making a mistake. Don't fear mistakes. Mistakes are how we learn. We fall on our rear ends, and that's the best time to get up and grow, and that too applies to design and mixing pattern. So when you're doing that, you want to make sure that you are getting outside of your own way of fear of failure, really, right? I mean, choose something in your house that is maybe a pillow or something or a throw, and make yourself a little corner. And you'll figure out whether that's okay to last, if it works in your world, or if you need to expand upon that. That's what I would recommend.
Yes, that's great. So because like a pillow, you can change it if you
Absolutely.
get sick of it.
You're not tethered to it. Yeah.
When you're taking a wallpaper or a tile, how do you know you're not going to get sick of it?
Well, it's a lot to do with trust. I mean, trusting yourself, your own instincts, right? We kind of forget about those sometimes. And trusting an expert. I have countless examples of where I was going to introduce a pattern or a wallpaper or a piece of art, and one person in the couple was just totally hesitant, didn't understand it, was fearful of it. And in every single case, over the phenomenal amount of projects I've done in the past decade and a half, they have all, at the end of the project, that's been their favorite thing.
Wow.
It's a crazy, crazy psychology. I think we end up, I think there's one should almost study this. I think there's a sort of continuum that where we find fear, we actually find the most satisfaction once we get through that fear. There's something there. That's not my area, but yes.
It's some kind of doorway.
It is
It's
some kind
interesting.
of doorway. Yes. So a great place to start, I'm sure you've heard this, but a great place to start with pattern wallpaper is a powder room, a powder bath, because it's an enclosed space. It allows you to be expressive, but also shut the door when you sort of feel a little uncomfortable with it. I guess going back to the trust thing, trust me. When you do it, you will love, love, love what you've done, and you'll feel incredibly proud of yourself for having stepped out of your norm and gone to this thing that you were actually quite attracted to, right? I mean, I found this paper because I fell in love with it.
Yes,
and then I
love
hesitated.
it.
I mean, not in my case, but you find something, you love it, and then you hesitate. don't listen to that. It spoke to you for a reason.
It's probably those voices of like, what will other people think,
Those
or how will it be
terrible
perceived, or I'm stepping outside of the box.
Right.
And so it really is about kind of unleashing
Yes.
who you are and self-expression.
Yes, completely. It's really important to step outside of the proverbial box. I as a mother of two, I am constantly reinforcing that. I want my children to be completely comfortable with making mistakes and feeling like they can handle those things. We sometimes skim over that and sort of stick our heads in the sand, and that is, in my view, the absolute wrong thing to do, because if you don't digest, it just adds up. And the same thing happens in your space in your home. When you haven't had a chance to really take care of it, it all gets sort of nerve-wracking, and it shouldn't. It should be your place for replenishment.
Is there a moment in your history where you took that uncomfortable step as a designer and it was a scary place to go, but it was like a tipping point in your work?
I mean, that's a great question, Natasha. Nobody's ever asked me that. I will say, for me, my story is a little unusual. It's not like most, because I started in a room that wasn't my own at boarding school so young. So there wasn't really ever a tipping point. It was, for me, more that my spaces were the precise definition of where I could find my comfort, right? I was in a foreign place, literally, physically, and in a foreign country with a language that I didn't yet speak or was just learning. And so for me, that was the uncomfortable part, and I used the way I created my spaces to feel tethered. So I almost did the opposite. That's how I would build my sort of little personality world that defined my space in whatever boarding school I was in.
So you're in this space and it doesn't feel good.
Yes.
Right? So what did you do?
It just feels impersonal.
It's
right?
impersonal. So what did you do to make it feel good?
I thought about what it was that I was trying to accomplish. I mean, even
But
when
were
I
you
was
allowed to even express that way? In
not
that
always,
no.
and of course I had to break some rules. I had the good fortune a few years on at a different school. I was paired with my cousin, who was a few years older, my dear, dear cousin. And she and I were granted permission to share a room. And this was a Catholic school, nuns, curfews, all of that. We had a great time there, but when lights were out, lights were out. And so we were given our space, which was, like I said, slightly outside of the dormitory, and we would wait until lights out, until everything was quiet, maybe wait 20 minutes, and then we would start moving around the room. And, I think when the nuns saw what we had done the next day, they realized it was rather innocuous. And it really does, it satisfies a level of comfort. It's almost a soother. I tell my children, when I talk with friends about, how their babies might still be using a blanket, or soothing is a great thing. Adults should have soothers. Our spaces should be soothing, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
There's nothing wrong with finding something that makes you feel completely at ease.
For sure.
So if trying a wallpaper is going to do that, go for it. I mean, it's a fun experiment that's probably going to make you happy every time you walk by it.
So take a risk.
Absolutely. Always. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time today.
My
I
pleasure.
could talk about this for hours.
Well, it's
really.
always fun to have this conversation. So
More to have.
yes,
There will
yes,
be more.
Yes, for sure.
Well, if you liked this episode today, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe below, because we have new videos coming out every single week. In the comments below, we want to hear from you. What patterns have worked for you, or what pattern do you identify with? And don't forget to live your dream already. Ready? 1, 2, 3, whoosh!